First of all, I think it's what every parent should be, is what you're being right now, which is unconditionally loving your child and supporting your child in whoever they are. I mean, there are so many parents that are just, oh, you're not going the way I imagined or wanted you to be, and freak out, and you're so loving and supportive of Zaya, and what a special child she is.
Yes, she is. Thank you so much for that. First of all, me and my wife Gabrielle Union, we are proud. When I say proud, we are proud parents of a child in the LGBTQ plus community, and we're proud allies as well. And we take our roles and our responsibility as parents very seriously. So when our child comes home with a question, when our child comes home with an issue, when our child comes home with anything, it's our job as parents to listen to that, to give them the best information that we can, the best feedback that we can. And that doesn't change because sexuality is now involved in it. So once Zaya, our 12-year-old, came home, and first Zion, everybody, I don't know if everyone knows, originally named Zion born as a boy, came home and said, hey, so I want to talk to you guys. I think going forward, I'm ready to live my truth. And I want to be referenced as she and her. I would love for you guys to call me Zaya. And so internally, now is our job to, one, go out and get information, to reach out to every relationship that we have. My wife reached out to everybody on the cast of Pose. We're just trying to figure out as much information we can to make sure that we give our child the best opportunity to be, her best self.
Yeah, I mean,
What exactly is cultural Marxism, the dominant culture of today? How did the founders of communism figure out a way to take over our country, not with guns and weapons, but with values and ideas? Let's take a closer look at this and see exactly how it happened. There was a man named Karl Marx. Marx got an idea. His idea was that the workers of the world should unite and rise up to counter an evil foe, that foe being capitalism. Capitalism, the idea that people and private companies should be able to own the means of production and be free to earn and have as much as they wished, was anathema to Marx. Marx felt the state should own the means of production, as well as products produced, and then the state should distribute a fair share of all such products to each and every worker. Thus, in his book, The Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx thundered, "Workers of the world, unite!" Sure that he had a principle to unify all workers in every country, Marx looked forward to eventually taking over the world.
Karl Marx believed that you would have a rebellion by the workers against the capitalist system, which would then create a Marxist communist society where you would have dictatorship of the proletariat.
Unfortunately, when World War I broke out, the workers of the world did not unite. In fact, the workers united with their respective countries and fought each other.
What happened was the Marxists had an enormous disillusionment when the French and the Germans and the British workers all rose up for the fatherland and went to war happily, fighting one another.
Marx's idea was a total failure. Workers were more loyal to their respective countries, churches, and cultural values than they were to their counterparts in other countries.
They did not want to give up their houses, their cars, their stoves, their products. They did not want to have a classless society. They did not vote, and they didn't even have an overthrow.
Some years after Marx failed, several of his disciples got a new idea on how to take over the world. One of his disciples, Antonio Gramsci, while where else but in prison, wrote up a series of plans, now known as the Prison Notebooks. In this plan, Gramsci announced, "The workers of the world will unite only after the Long March is over." The Long March?
In other words, they had to get into the culture and change the way of people's thinking. And if people were thinking about patriotism and nation and God and country, that was a mechanism which was too resistant to Marxism. It could never take hold. So you had to erode and destroy that in the individuals. That began what's called the long march through the institutions, through the seminaries, through the churches, through the media, through Hollywood, and all the rest of it, to create an anti-Christian culture which would destroy the Christian beliefs and convictions in the vast majority of the people, so they would embrace the ideas of Marxism, and they would embrace the ideas that they had rejected, and they would be open to a takeover, basically, by Marxists. Now, not political Marxists, but cultural Marxists.
Rather than workers uniting and marching into battle, thus seizing power through force, they would make a long march through the institutions. Institutions like the arts, cinema, theater, literature, schools, college, seminaries, newspapers, magazines, and what is now known as radio, TV, and the mass media.
And if you haven't heard the name Desmond Napolis, get ready for this trailblazing 11-year-old drag kid who RuPaul is calling the future. His bravery is inspiring so many. We're going to talk to him in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at his amazing story.
I am Desmond. I'm 11 years old, and I like pizza, trains, and drinking root beer since it's caffeine-free. I also do drag, and I love to put on makeup, dresses, and wigs, and of course, jewelry if necessary.
I'm David Icke from England. I went through an extraordinary series of what you might call paranormal experiences, not that they were, 20 years ago in 1990 and 89, and basically the veil lifted, and I saw the world in a completely different way, and I started on a journey of research which has led me over 20 years to a very obvious conclusion that this world is controlled by very, very few people behind the people we think are in power, and they have a very, very malevolent agenda for humanity as a whole, who to them are nothing more than cattle. Disconnected from their parents, where they're bred in laboratories, and where drugs are used to get the children to, and as they become adults, the whole population, to love their servitude and not rebel against it. And we are now seeing quite blatantly the movement to remove children from their parents. It's been done through what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, step by step by step by step, where more and more parental rights are taken by the state, more and more and more, and where the school becomes ever more powerful in the control it has over the children.
Hedonism. Hedonism is the belief that pleasure, or the absence of pain, is the most important principle in determining the morality of a potential course of action. Pleasure can be things like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it can also include any intrinsically valuable experience, like reading a good book. Hedonism is a type of consequentialism, and it has several forms. For example, normative hedonism is the idea that pleasure should be people's primary motivation.
Hey man, today we're talking about Satan's strategy to destroy the family.
Hey guys, it's Emily with your Holly Buzz, and everyone is going crazy ever since we wrote Jaden Smith's new love of wearing dresses, so let's break this down. So yes, the young wizard himself, the guru, the Twitter philosopher, has just delivered us the hottest new trend in men's fashion, women's fashion. Jaden explained in one of his more relatable tweets that moment when you're wearing a dress and you swerve way too hard. Okay, I have no idea what that means, but then again, I don't know why Jaden's Instagrams are all so tiny either. But hey, I support sartorial risks. That's the whole point of fashion, but let's just see what Papa Smith had to say about all this.
Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me.
At the war's end, Marxist theorists had to confront the question, what had gone wrong? Antonio Gramsci in Italy and Georg Lukács in Hungary believed they had the answer.
Gramsci and Lukács argued that Western culture had blinded the working class to its true Marxist class interests. Before a Marxist revolution could take place, Western culture had to be destroyed. In 1919, Lukács, who was considered the most brilliant Marxist theorist since Marx himself, asked, "Who will save us from Western civilization?" That same year, 1919, Lukács became Deputy Commissar for Culture in the Bolshevik Bela Kun government in Hungary, where he launched a program of cultural terrorism. As part of that program, Lukács introduced a radical sex education program into the Hungarian schools. Political correctness, as we know it, was already beginning to take form.
He tried to actually undermine the unity of the family, and that was one of the reasons that he tried to introduce sex education.
Laszlo Pastor, a leader in the Hungarian resistance against the communist takeover of Hungary after World War II, explains why children were targeted.
It's always much tougher to convert an adult, to do something what he was taught not to do.
The program left great residual effects on Hungary.
The only thing what we were permitted to accept as far as culture is concerned, what they were teaching, that was it. Free thinking was a very big sin.
Following Lukács's lead, the Frankfurt School would be the vehicle that translated Marxism from economic into cultural terms, giving us what we now know as political correctness.
Another new member was Erich Fromm. Fromm, a practicing psychoanalyst, was noted for his radical Marxist social psychology. He pioneered the concept of sexual liberation and gender politics. According to Martin Jay, in Fromm's view, masculinity and femininity were not reflections of essential sexual differences. They were derived instead from differences in life functions, which were in part socially determined. Of critical importance for the injection of the Frankfurt School's work into the student rebellion of the 1960s was Marcuse's revival of Fromm's notion of sexual liberation.
Marcuse, however, was the main conduit of ideas. But Marcuse had written one important work in the 1950s called Eros and Civilization.
Marcuse's Eros and Civilization condemned all restrictions on sexual behavior, calling instead for polymorphous perversity. Polymorphous perversity helped open the door to aspects of political correctness, such as gay liberation.
My name is John Paul Kane. I am a school teacher, currently teaching kindergarten. Oh, I'm also a drag performer. Named Facelift. So Drag Queen Story Time, it's just a wonderful time for me to be able to bring my love of working with kids with my performance. I've always been very sort of creative and dramatic. I don't know, there's just something that's kind of magical in the transformation. I know I'm still me. Ultimately, my kids, they influence a lot of the style of how Faye has evolved over the last 10 years. The music that I choose, the sort of brightness to the colors of the costumes I wear. So if anything, the kids have inspired her more than I would say anything else. When you think about it, really, bringing drag performers together with little kids is kind of a perfect relationship. And it's kind of like drag performers are clowns, right? Like they really sort of, they play things up, they're over the top, they're like a cartoon come to life.